Letevskaya's in front. Debbie's finishing very hard. Letevskaya in front. Flintoff comes at her. Doesn't quite. I don't think. 53.18. It's a fabulous run. Flintoff smashed her Commonwealth record. We think that Debbie Flintoff, and she has. She's got it. She's waited to the last stride to win the gold medal.
Well, that's the end of one of the great races from the Seoul Olympic Games of 1988 when Debbie Flintoff King was able to get over the line and win a terrific gold medal in the women's 400 metres hurdles in Seoul. Bruce McAvaney's famous call, and I think Bruce, being the perfectionist he is still a little bit annoyed about himself. Doesn't quite, I don't think, but Debbie was able to get over the line. And it's a great pleasure for our episode this week of Dashing Dan's Olympic Adventures for Aussie Home Loans to deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and capital. They do Zoom as well. But I've got the great Debbie Flintoff King with me. Debbie, thanks for joining us on the program. Great to chat again.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Nice to speak to you.
Now, Debbie, we'll go back to that race, seeing we've just heard the end of it. You were confident you'd won, even though Bruce and Glennis and Raylene in the commentary box weren't so confident.
Well, I guess an athlete can feel if they've only just made it, and it was something I always practiced was to try and hit my opponent, get there to the line before anyone else did. So I felt as if I had, and you really have to wait for the replay of it to see it, whether you've won or not. But I felt as if I had.
Do you or did you practice lunging to the line? We hear about it in AFL footy nowadays that they practice match simulation, rugby league as well at the end of a game when the game's close, how they go about going through scenarios like that. Was that part of your training to just lunge to the line if it gets close?
Yeah, yes, it was. In fact, most sessions we would finish off with a few going over the last hurdle and sprinting to the line. So it became second nature. It wasn't a matter of, will I catch her? It's a matter of, okay, dip now. So, yeah, it was part of training.
Did you feel confident going into the race? Because back in 84, the first time that the event was an Olympic Games event, you finished sixth. And I remember speaking to you previously about this. You felt you went out a bit too quickly, too early. Obviously, you changed the way you ran this time.
Oh, yeah. You evolve with the actual training that you do. So what I had to do was almost not hold myself back. I mean, if anyone said to you, hold yourself back, you'd probably run slow. But my husband would just say you need to coast in a way that first five and come home the last five. So it was something where I was sort of legs were moving just as fast, but upper body was a little bit more relaxed the first five. And then I start to really work the arms the second five so that it looked like I was getting faster, but I was probably just slowing down the slowest, if you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean. I mean, Glennis and Raylene, I've watched the race a few times to get ready for this in the last 48 hours or so. And Raylene, who, as we know, is pretty blunt, you'd know that probably more than most, actually felt that Letevskaya went out too quickly, a bit like you in 84. Having
yes,
watched the race yourself, do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. But in both instances, we were both pretty raw. So, for example, in 84 was my first Olympics. Not a lot of people know, but I actually fell out of the blocks in the first start, and it was after the gun went off. So the starter didn't have to call it back, but he did. So I came back, and my heart was going so fast because I'd fallen flat in my face, come back to start the race again. So I went out really too fast and basically shot up, and I couldn't keep my legs going the last five fast enough. So, and that was probably what happened to Letevskaya, who was the Russian. She did a similar thing to what I did in 84. She didn't fall over, but she went out so fast that she wanted to try and hold on, whereas I was almost doing the opposite of running out controlled and then fighting home.
In the lead up, obviously, you're in pretty good form. You'd won the Commonwealth Games gold medal in Edinburgh. You'd been a silver medalist in the World Championships in Rome. How confident were you going to Seoul that this could be your year?
Well, I left Europe that year. I think it was around about June, July, having the fastest time of the year. So in that respect, there was confidence. But what really happened is my husband, who was my coach, sat me down and said, let's work out this race. And you used to have touchdown times. So every hurdle had a certain time that you would try and make to be able to get a certain time. So he would put down on a piece of paper exactly what I would do between the hurdles. And, maybe each hurdle was increased by 1 to 2 tenths of a second as you go around. And he did that and he said, now, do you think that's achievable? And I go, yeah, that's perfect. I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. So he said, well, if you do that, this is the time you'll run. And he had 53.2, which is, as you know, I did 53.17. So for me going into that, it was like, I can do this. I honestly can do this. It wasn't a matter of, I just hope I do really well. It was like, I've got confidence. I can do this. So that was what was really good with Phil. He always made sure that he made me understand that what was the possibilities that I could do, and that was one of them. And I just went in there with 100% confidence that I could win. And if I didn't, then I gave it everything I can.
So it was scenario building, wasn't it? Basically, just sort of a plan A, plan B, plan C sort of setup.
Yeah, totally. He would say, all right, this is what your touchdown is to hurdle 1. This is where we have to be at hurdle 5. This is where we have to be at hurdle 8. And then we're just going to chase people home. So for me to sort of start picking up people as I went through, yes, there were people ahead of me the first 5 hurdles, but I had to run my own plan. I couldn't look at them and say, oh, no, I'm running too slow, because that would muck up my plan. So it was real tunnel vision. And then I could use them about the 8th hurdle, which is the third last hurdle, and I had to race them then like I would in training.
Debbie Flintoff King is my guest on Dashing Dan's Olympic Adventures. Areas of expertise for our sponsor in Aussie Home Loans include building a property portfolio, refinancing and debt consolidation. They've got over 25 lenders. So in the final of the 8 competitors, were the 8 that made it the ones you thought would make it? Was that part of the scenario building too?
Yes. They were girls that I had been racing against for 2-3 years, maybe even some were longer than that, because the Russians I had been racing for 5-6 years. So all of the people in the final were the ones that I would have expected to be in there. Yes, there wasn't anyone that didn't make it that should have, unless they may have been injured throughout the year. But I can't think of anyone in particular.
Now, Sabine Bush had won the World Championship in 1987. And Bruce and Glenys in particular, Glenys Nunn, the gold medalist in 84, who's part of the commentary team, they hadn't been all that impressed with her lead-up form to the final and said that Sabine had been foxing. Now, obviously, you've got to worry about your race. Did you have a similar view when you watched her back later and thought, yeah, maybe she had been foxing, or you hadn't thought about her at all?
Well, she wasn't foxing. She just had a year of injuries, so she wasn't in her best shape. And I remember racing against her in that year overseas in Europe, and she wasn't running well at all. So, whether you call it foxing, whether you call it injured, she certainly wasn't like, oh, I'm not going to run well here because, I'm going to be tested or anything like that. She's seriously, once you have a year where it's interrupted with injury, you have doubt, you have possibly more injuries, you have the racing and the training that doesn't go like you planned. So you're just not with it. You're not 100% in the game.
When did you think you were a chance of winning? Because coming around the bend with about 150 to go, you weren't out of it, but you were obviously back a bit. And if you didn't know the result, you'd be thinking, with the greatest respect, she's no chance. But obviously you've got this great self-belief. When did you think you could let it sky down and just get the job done?
Well, with the planned race that we had, like I explained, the segments of the race, I had expected to be, in the top 4 or so at hurdle 8, which is what I was. So from then on, I just had to try and peg them back. So I didn't even think about my stepping. I didn't think about, the times. All I thought about was catching the next person. It was like one at a time. So once I hit hurdle 8 and I knew I was in the top 4, I knew that it was a possibility if I kept clawing them back that I was going to win. So I never doubted myself. And it's one of those things that if you doubt yourself, you're lost for a start. So you have to have the confidence to know that you can win. Otherwise, you wouldn't, I wouldn't think that you would be there. You have to think that you'd get in at least top three. And I'm a big person for, chewing off more than you can chew and chew hard. So I just kept pegging one back at a time. I think I was fourth over the eighth. I think I was third over the ninth. Coming to the 10th, I ended up being second, and it was just about mowing her down and exactly what I did at training. So, as I said, I'm going to give it everything I've got, chase her down, dip at the line, let's see if you get there. And it was one of those things that I can do this. So if it happened, it happened. If it didn't, then I wasn't quite good enough.
Looked like Levitt Sky hadn't practiced the lunging. You lunged forward. She seemed to lunge back. And in a lot of ways, that was the difference, wasn't it?
That was the difference. And I spoke to her, not that she spoke a lot of English, but I did see her the day after. We were both out shopping, and I saw her, and she actually said that when she got to the line, she didn't realise that I was so close, and it was like I've made it sort of thing, rather than finishing off the race. So she's relaxed over the line. I've pushed over the line, and that was the difference, 1/100th of a second.
So you knew you'd won? I mean, as I've said a couple of times, I don't think many other people thought you'd won, but you knew you'd won. But being you, nice and relaxed, well, certainly on the outside anyway, Debbie, I'm sure you might have been swimming frantically on the inside, but you just looked pretty relaxed. You even looked a little bit like, I might have just missed out here. But as you've said a few times to me, you knew you'd won. And it wasn't probably until they announced it did you jump up and down. But to me, you look like you just missed out until they made that announcement. But I'm getting that impression that's not the case.
Yes, no, I felt that I had won, and that's because it's on the dip. If you dip well, then you've got there. I dipped well. I felt as if my, chest came a little bit further than hers, and as when you see the replay, you can see she relaxes back. So I felt as if I had, but one of the TV men had come up to me and said, "Oh, congratulations, you got silver." And I go, "Well, hang on a minute. I really thought I'd won here. Let's just see the replay first." So, it's waiting and finding out the full result. And yes, at first I would have been disappointed because I really thought that on the day I did my best and that I was good enough to win and that I had dipped properly. But, give me a couple of months down the track and I would have been extremely proud of a silver. But knowing inside or feeling inside that I had won. And you know what? It was the first race probably in my whole career that I went into it feeling really relaxed, because I'm a very nervous type of person, anxious type of person when it comes to racing. I can train like the devil. When it comes to racing, I actually I can get quite anxious about it. So that was a day that I walked into the stadium. I heard my family cheer me on up in the stand, which normally I wouldn't even look up into the stand. It's like, no, I almost didn't want to be there. But on that day, I was feeling great, and I was emotionally, physically, even spiritually, I was in it to win. So I really felt like it was going to be my day.
So why were you so relaxed? Because you'd had a lot of experience, because you'd had a good year, you'd been through 84, were all those part of the factors?
Oh, look, I think it's a mixture of all of that. I mean, in 87, when I got silver at the World Championships, I remember, going back to the draw board with Phil and saying, well, what do we need to do to get first? I mean, what more can I do to get first? And two things that we really needed to work on was a bit more flexibility, in muscles, because I was always quite muscle bound and tight. And the other thing was to relax more before races. So I really got into yoga and I really got into meditation. And I honestly believe they were the two little stepping stones that were able to get me there. So I took a different approach to the race, deep breathing, know you can do it with confidence, feeling less pressured because I was there to do a job, knew what I had to do. There was no doubts, there was no questions. So it was just one of those things where things went right and I felt good. And I know that I can thank Ian Gawler for that, because he was the gentleman that helped me with my meditation. And I know that was the winning link for me.
No one had heard of meditation 35 years ago, 36 years ago, Debbie, had they really?
Well, a lot of them, you think it's all guru, but for me, all it was breathing, relaxing, focusing in on the inside. Yeah, that's pretty well all it was for me. And yes, I would listen to his tapes. He made me some tapes which made me relax and breathe, so that when I was anxious, that's exactly what I did. I used to relax and breathe and focus on what I'm doing rather than a little bit yesterday, a little bit tomorrow. It was in the moment, and it worked for me. And I have to say, I still do it today.
Now, last week we had Scott McGrory, Olympic gold medal cyclist in Sydney in the Madison with Brett Aitken on the program for Aussie Home Loans. And he had a family tragedy and he somehow found a way. Sadly for you, you lost your sister Noeline in the lead up to the Olympic Games. How were you able to compartmentalise that tragic loss and still perform at your optimum?
I don't know. I don't know how I got through that. She passed away about 2 weeks before the Games, and we just managed to go to the funeral before we actually left to fly to Seoul. I'm not too sure, but look, I don't know how I got over that. It was one of those things, she used to always celebrate when I would compete, because she very rarely came to see me race unless I was racing in Australia. Don't know. Once again, I think I was in a zone, and I think it was my meditation to help relax me and help focus me. So not sure how I got through it, but I did. And I guess after it all happens, that's when you sort of fall in a bit of a heap and take a while to get over it. But until then, it was fine.
Did you feel
I was sick. Unfortunately, I did get sick just before Seoul. So my sister passed away. We had the funeral, and then I got very sick. And maybe that last week to 10 days of not as much training was also good for me as well, because I trained hard until then. So I was able to maybe relax a little bit more. My muscles were a bit better. I was, perhaps not as fatigued. And the day, I actually ended up having to take antibiotics. So the day of my final was the last day of my antibiotic.
Never considered pulling out?
Oh, sorry. No, I tell a lie. I remember when my husband came, I thought you meant as in the lead up, when my husband came and told me that he told me that my sister had passed away, and it was quite shocked. So it was one of those things that, she was 33 and had a heart attack. I mean, who hears that? That's amazing. So at first it's like, I don't even care about the Olympics. Who cares? I'm not even going to do it now. And it was Phil that said to me, no, she would want you to do this. She was always one of your best supporters. You need to do this. So we actually ended up doing a time trial the next day, of which we had planned anyway. And he said, do you want to do it? And I said, yeah, I feel like I can do it. And that was a really good race in bad conditions. It was rainy and it was wet, and it was the first time that I had beaten a training partner, a male training partner. And from then on, I just felt like I was in a bit of a trance. So, once again, maybe it was the relaxation that I focused in on what I had to do. Once Phil said to me that, this is what she'd want you to do, she would not want you to pull out, I knew what I was going to do.
You started off running 400 metres flat, and then it was 400 metres hurdles. Was that always the plan, or originally it was just going to be 400 metres?
Well, not really. I was a heptathlete and
Right.
won an Australian title being a heptathlete. Then I went into 400 hurdles, and 400s were really just to help my 400 hurdles, to be honest. So while I did well in the flat, my main ambition was to do well in the hurdles. So any 400 I did was just to get flat speed. So really my choice was the 400 hurdles.
Why did it take until LA for this to become an event? I mean, it's one of the great events now.
Yeah, well, it was the same as the women's marathon. That also was the first time that it happened. And heptathlon as well. I believe the heptathlon, the marathon, and the 400 hurdles, 1984 was the first time for all those three events. And I guess it's just women evolving into doing different events. So once that happened, once we have a new event, for whatever reason, the Australians always do well because we're always starting at the start. So you have Glenys Nunn winning in 84. You have what was the marathoner's name? Do you remember the marathoner's name that got a
Lisa,
Yep.
Lisa Martin, Lisa on
Yep.
Decky. Yeah.
on Vicky, yeah.
Yeah.
Lisa got a silver at the 84, and then I go on 88 and win the hurdle. So it was like the Australians were really great at starting these new events. Also, Saxby in the walk.
Yes.
So a lot of good female athletes that seem to start off at a new event when we're all equal, and then we go from there.
Do you think at the time you got enough credit for how good you were? I mean, obviously the Sydney Olympics you did. I watched that last night, and that brought tears to my eyes. I thought that was an outstanding recognition for yourself and for Shane Gould and for Raylene and for the late great Betty and the late great Shirley Strickland. And then, of course, Kathy Freeman, Dawn Fraser. I thought you finally got the recognition you deserved. Do you think it took until that moment for you all to get that recognition of how good you'd been over the years at the Olympics?
Oh, look, I never looked for that. I mean, I never looked where there were, articles on me, or, I mean, my dad always used to keep articles for me, but it wasn't something that I looked at. It's something that my pressure on myself was worse than the pressure the press put on me, because I put a lot of pressure on myself to do well. So I didn't look for recognition because I got satisfied by doing the results in the time. So it wasn't something that I even looked at. So I'll say, yeah, I had more than enough recognition for what I did, for sure. And yes, the one of the best moments of my life was the Sydney Olympics, because you were doing something that was amazing without the pressure. I felt for Kathy having to, do all that and then go and compete. But for me to be there and be part of it and not have to compete was actually amazing.
Was that as good as winning the gold medal?
Look, they're different things, because one was enjoyment, one was hard work, but I chose to do it. And then there was relief. That's the gold medal. Obviously, you chose to do it. It was hard work, and I did it, and there was relief. Whereas Sydney, there wasn't really any training for it other than the night before. It was, as you said, fantastic recognition. Not that I was looking for it, but it was to be part of it. And it was a beautiful feeling. And I was lucky because I had that part that I ran through the centre of the athletes right down the middle to give it to Kathy. And obviously Kathy had an amazing part in it to actually light the cauldron, but I think I had the second best part, running down through the athletes. So it was great day.
And did you know, Debbie, that there was an issue with the water feature? It wasn't working. I think most of us knew, but it didn't really ruin the opening ceremony too much. I mean, those in the media that are negative Nellies, and unfortunately there were quite a few of us at times, probably wanted to make it an issue, but it didn't end up being much of an issue, did it? Once it worked, it was fine.
No, it was, maybe a minute or two. It was just one of the things that added to the night, really. It took a while for it to go up, but when it did, it was quite mind-blowing. It was beautiful.
Great Debbie Flintoff King is my guest. She won gold at Seoul in the 400 metres hurdles, an outstanding performance. And we're here for Dashing Dan's Olympic Adventures and for Aussie Home Loans. Her areas of expertise include purchasing a property, construction, pre-approvals, first home buyers, equipment loans, car loans, personal loans, any loans you like. Now, Debbie, you've spoken about Kathy Freeman, Raylene Boyle's immortal line. What a relief after Bruce's comments when she crossed the line, having won gold medal. Was it relief or delight for you? Because basically she had so much to lose if she didn't win that gold medal.
I was there the night she won, and it was electrifying. It was amazing. And I'm sure she would have had a similar approach to possibly what I had, whereas, silver's not going to be a question here. It has to be gold, go or bust, because she had so many people on the back of her, jumping on her back just to sort of say, hey, we're here and we can help you, sort of thing. But she was amazing, and I take my hat off to her. She is someone that I'm always going to look up to, because, she's younger than me, but she is an amazing athlete that put it together on the day when she had to do it. And yeah, yes, I did, but she had much more pressure than I did. And to have done it in front of a home crowd, being part of the ceremony, as well as getting sick. She also got sick before the Olympics. So I think athletes always walk a fine line where, you know, they're really amazing racehorses where they've got that fine line of being sick or injured, and if they make it on the day, it's a lucky time. So, but she was amazing, absolutely amazing, and I'll always take my hat off to her.
I'll always remember when 150 to go, and two of the greatest broadcasts of all time, Bruce McAvaney and Tim Lane, will be on our program in the next week or so. They said she's going to have to work for it, and she's had to work for it. But in the end, she won, to use a race calling term or a horse race term, by panels of fencing. She did easily, really, in the end, didn't she?
She did, but, you know, everybody, if they're going to do something special, has to work for it. I mean, it's nothing that comes easy. So you expect to hurt a little bit. You expect to try a little harder. You expect to, you know, trodden on those other people that are trying to do it for what you want to do, because you want to be the best. So it's going to hurt. You're going to have to work, but the result's going to be there at the end anyway.
Now, your dad, Les Flintoff, played footy for Richmond back in the 1950s, obviously well before your time, well before my time. He's described himself as a modest footballer, or at the time he described himself as a modest footballer, but 17 games is better than most. Then he became one of the great recruiters. Graham Richmond, as you know, he wouldn't take no for an answer. Take no prisoners was Graham Richmond's attitude. He got Les Flintoff basically to go out and travel the country. What do you remember about that? And did he ever talk much about all the great players that he picked up? Francis Burke, Royce Hart, Kevin Sheedy, all these players were part of the great era for Richmond, 67, 69, 73 and 74. And as I said a little bit earlier when we were setting this interview up, he often got these players from under the noses of other clubs. He must have been very good at it.
Yes. Look, as you said, I obviously wasn't there when he was doing this, but he was able to stay friends with a lot of them as well. So he must have done something special with them to sort of get them to change sides and come out, or wherever they were. He worked well with Graham Richmond, as you said, and even at my mum and dad's 50th wedding anniversary, I think there was about 5 of those people you just mentioned there.
Right.
So he kept friends with them, you know, whether he befriended them and got them over that way, I'm not sure. But look, my dad passed away 2019. He was my number one fan. He was a great supporter that came to almost all my training sessions. He was a beautiful person, a positive person, and he is missed greatly. Especially just to, you know, help me bring up his grandchildren, my children. Sorely lost, but a beautiful person, really lovely.
He described you as having a heart as big as Far Lap. Do you think you had a heart as big as Far Lap, Debbie?
Oh, no. I just think when you want something and you work for something and it's there in your reach, you do it. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's sport or whether it's work or whether it's being a mother or whether it's teaching yoga or whatever. If you're good at it and you can see where it's going to lead you, and you know, it's you're going to enjoy it, then you do it. So no, I don't think I had a heart as big as Far Lap, but I found something that I was good at and wanted to do and wanted to be the best. So that's what you do.
Did you know Seoul was going to be your last Olympics? You went to the Commonwealth Games in Auckland in 1990, 3 silver medals in the events you participated in then. Or were you hoping maybe to defend in Barcelona? Or did you feel in your heart of hearts that Seoul might be it?
Well, 2 Olympics in an athlete's lifetime is pretty good, you know, because you've been training for 10 years or whatever just to do that. I didn't think about going on. Once I had won and got my gold medal, which is what I wanted to achieve, it was like, well, what else is there now? I guess I could go and compete as an Olympic champion, and I did for a couple of years, working through, and I got a lot of injuries the 2 years after the Olympics, mainly because there were a lot of people wanting my time, whether it was for functions or, you know, starting races or talking at seminars and things like that. So instead of making training a priority, I would turn up late to training. I might skip my training and leave a little bit earlier to get to a function. So while I still wanted to do it, it wasn't possible because everyone wanted a little piece of me. And I found it hard to say no. I've always found it hard to say no. That's why I have my husband who can say no for me 99% of the time. But, it's just one of those things, what do you do? So I was injured a lot. I went into the Commonwealth Games 2 years later, having had a calf injury 3 weeks before. I hurdled. My first hurdling in a few months was the heat. I went on to get second in the final, which was disappointing to finish with, but hey, can't complain. I got what I wanted to out of it, and that's the main thing.
Well, I mean, you won 2 gold medals at the Commonwealth Games as well, so you've had an outstanding career and numerous other medals as well. I mean, just on the fact that when you do become a gold medalist, and the financial benefits are better now than they were, obviously, when you're an athlete. But I can understand, and everyone that's listening to this will be able to understand that people wanted to hear from you, and you've also got to try in your own way. My sport has given me a gold medal, and I'm now getting opportunities, whether they're financial or not, also to increase my profile. People have to understand that, Debbie, that people want to hear your story because it's a great story. And you can understand why maybe the training didn't become the priority that it was before you won the gold medal.
Yes, or I guess I had made up my mind that maybe I wouldn't do the next Olympics. I mean, you have to have something to go for. And what was that? Was it going to be an Olympic record, or was it going to be another gold medal? So I always have dreams that I went on and I kept running, and I always seemed to do well in my dreams, but it wasn't one that I was excited to do. And yes, I can understand why people would want me to talk about what I had done, what I had achieved, but they don't go together. So I would have been better possibly retiring and doing all that and enjoying it and giving other people enjoyment on what I had achieved and telling them about it. But the two didn't work together. So hence injuries, sicknesses, not running as well, and then saying, well, I actually ended up, what made up my mind is I actually fell pregnant anyway. So I had my first child. So that was like someone up there saying, well, no, this is it for you. That's done. You're going to have a family now. So it finished like that.
Sometimes decisions can be made, and they can be the right decisions too. So and also congratulations to, I believe your daughter got married earlier this year, and I've seen some photos and you looked absolutely fantastic as a family. So that would go down as one of the great highlights of your life too, Debbie, wouldn't it?
It was the best day. I wanted to do the day again. It was such a good day. So I've got another daughter and a son to come up next, so we'll have to see how long that takes. And then grandchildren. I've got lots of things happening.
Oh, well, that's great. Exactly what you need now. It's the great Debbie Flintoff King with us on Dashing Dan's Olympic Adventures. Thanks to Aussie Home Loans. They can deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and capital, and they do Zoom as well. Now, when you retired, when you started having a family, you coached Lauren Hewitt, the sprinter. Did you enjoy the coaching?
No.
No?
I had a lot to give back to the sport with the knowledge that I had achieved, and I ran athletic camps for a few years, and some great athletes came through that. Obviously, Lauren was one of them, and did very well. But I can't say coaching is something that I really love. I have a lot of knowledge, and I'm happy to pass it on. But I did it for about 6 years, and even recently, my daughter works at a school near Melbourne, and the last 4 years we've been helping out their athletic team, Phil and I, and they've been doing really well. But they're young children that are, grade 4, 5s and 6s, and they're sponges. They just learn so well, so quickly. They implement what you tell them, and that's quite rewarding. But we just do that 2 or 3 months a year. So we've been doing that the last couple of years before COVID, and obviously then not COVID, and then a couple of years after COVID. So we've been doing that for a while, but it's not something I really enjoy. I would rather sit back and watch. But if someone asks me for knowledge or to help it, I'll give it.
Now, Phil took on another precocious talent, Jana Pittman, who was a bit unlucky when it came to Olympic Games, but she was the first person to win junior and senior world titles. She won a large number of those. She dominated Commonwealth Games. And in 2004, Debbie, she was ready, wasn't she? She was going to win that gold medal. And I think you've told me a story before. Not long before she hurt her knee, didn't she break the world record just in a training session?
Yeah, and that is honest. She ran a 52 in a training session.
Wow.
And then went into a race in Zurich. It must have been maybe a couple of weeks before, maybe 3 weeks before the Olympics, and did a meniscus just going over the side of the hurdle. So it was something that was really something she did every day, but whatever it was, maybe her knees were getting weaker, I don't know. Well, she had a lot of training under her belt because she'd been training since a young athlete and had done a lot of hard sessions. So she had a meniscus. She had a meniscus operation, which people don't believe, but I'm telling you, it happened. And she was racing 17 days later in the Olympic finals.
So she shouldn't have?
No, I think physically she was fine. Mentally, she wasn't. Mentally, it was like, how can I be doing this 17 days after an operation? And people didn't believe it. So she started to doubt herself, and she warmed up really well, like really well. And we thought, wow, this is going to be a great race. And then she started looking around and concentrating on what other people were doing, saw the Russian, wow, she looks really good. And she came over to Phil and said, I can't remember the lady's name, but, oh, she looks amazing. And Phil knew then she was lost because she didn't focus on what she was going to do. She was looking at what everyone else was doing. And she didn't stick to the race plan. She ran out like free beer. She died. Look, at worst, she could have got a medal. She could have easily got a bronze at least, maybe even a silver. At the time, she didn't believe she could get any of that, so she ended up getting fourth, I think.
Fifth.
Fifth. Yeah. That's right, fifth. But she was ready. Physically, she was ready. Mentally, I don't think she was quite there. And you do need to have both at the Olympic. You need to have both when you race anyway. But something as big as Olympic Games, you have to be both physically and emotionally ready to win.
You know her pretty well. She did spend some time living with you as well when Phil was coaching her. Do you think she's misunderstood a bit?
Yes, totally. She is an amazing athlete. She is an amazing person, and she's got the drive of anyone. She's got the best drive of anyone to want to do something. And I think that's shown in what she's achieved since then. I mean, those Olympics weren't going to be her day for whatever reason. She was an amazing athlete. Just even to look at her, she had the physique, she had the height, she had the strength. And, to go on now and to have 6 children and still be a doctor, I think gynecologist is what she's just finished. Wow, achievements of a driven person. So it's a shame, and she always says that she wished she had have been able to get that Olympic gold medal, but it's not the be all and end all, because she's had an amazing life. She's a person that, if you want something done, you ask Yana. She always puts on more onto her plate than she can handle it, but she handles it well. She's an amazing person.
Just on that, do you think that there are too many athletes out there that are expected to win gold? We saw Shane Kelly when he unfortunately didn't win gold in Atlanta in 1996 when his foot slipped out of the pedal, and he was red hot. And a lot of those hockey players missed out in 1980 due to the partial boycott, and they were probably at their prime, both the men's and the women's team. Do you think there's too much pressure placed on athletes in this country that they're expected to win gold, and when they don't, the criticism is too much?
Yeah, yes and no. As I said previously, Dan, you have to put enough pressure on yourself to expect to do well. And if you're not ready on the day emotionally and physically, then it's not your day. So that's something you don't just train and don't do anything for the mental side. So whether you close your eyes and mentally see the races and do that regularly, or go into meditation where you can focus more, or you have to do some sort of training on the emotional side. So if you turn up on the day and they're not clicked together, then maybe you've done more physical than you have mental. You really have to put the both together. and not everybody is up to that. Not, I'm not trying to sing my own praises, because hell, there's plenty of good athletes out there, but it's not easy to put physical and mental attributes together on the one time. It comes every 4 years, so you're doing it the one day in 4 years. It's not easy, and if it was easy, everyone would do it. So you've got to train both sides. You've got to put enough pressure on yourself that the pressure that the press give you doesn't even register, and that's the way you need to look at it.
Do you think athletics is in good shape in this country now, Debbie? I mean, obviously you've got a lot of other things on your plate. You did say you're involved with a local school for their athletics program for 2 or 3 months a year with your husband, Phil. Do you think we could do more, or do you think the sport's heading in the right direction?
Well, I think the track and field has certainly picked up. We seem to have, quite a few good middle distance runners. For me, it really boils down to finding the right coach for you. Maybe that is not easy to find. One, a good coach. It's not always easy. I mean, they're out there, but it's not always easy. But then two is finding a coach that's going to work with your personality and understand your personality and how to work with that. That is the hard part, is finding, as I said, a good coach, and then finding that coach that's going to suit your personality. And it's not easy for a lot of athletes. So you see a few of the middle distance runners coming through, the field events coming through. So yes, it is in good shape, but I think we could still bring in other coaches, or get the other coaches to pick up as well. I mean, that's probably not the right thing to say here, but the coach is where it all starts, and you've got to have the right coach first that has the knowledge, and then you've got to have the personality that suits the athlete. So they're the two things that come together.
Why was Phil such a good coach? And when your relationship changed from being the athlete and he was the coach to being boyfriend and girlfriend and then husband and wife, what were the dynamics like?
Well, we were boyfriend, girlfriend first.
Oh, were you? Right.
Yeah. So we were boyfriend, girlfriend for 6 months before he looked at me and said, "Are you serious? Are you you wanting to make the Olympics on this?" So when I met him, I was already Australian champion for the heptathlon, as I mentioned previous. And we decided, okay, well, I enjoy hurdling more. Let's try the new event that's coming out, which is the 400 hurdles. And he was very, not only positive, he had variety in his training sessions, so I was never bored. He made sure part of my training, in fact, a very important part of my training, was relaxation, whether it be meditation, whether it be massage, whether it be spa, whether it be whatever. So they were training sessions in themselves. We worked a lot on speed rather than, I feel that a lot of 400 hurdlers these days work a lot more on endurance, where I look at it as a sprint event. And I've rarely ran more than 300 metres. Repetition 300 metres. Occasionally in winter I might run some 500s. I can count on my hand how many times I ran 800s. So I worked a lot on speed there. And the other thing that I really loved it, he would say to me, okay, we're going to the national titles today. You're not going to win today. And my dad would say, what are you telling her that for? And he'll say, no, you're not going to win today, but we are going to do a personal best, and this time next year we're going to beat that girl. So he was more realistic, and he would come to it and say, okay, this is the time you're going to run today, and I would. So that grew, that confidence in him grew. So whenever he said, well, this is what you're going to do, I did it. And I guess we just worked, that's what I talk about, finding the coach is going to suit your personality. He came to 99% of the training sessions. He would look at me in my warm-up and go, no, I'm scrapping that session today. You look a bit flat. We're going to do this. Or he'd say, I'm scrapping that session today. You're looking amazing. We're going to do this. So it was just working with what he had and working with me as a person and me as an athlete.
The fact that he knew you well no doubt helped. Did your dad ever say to you quietly, What's Phil thinking, Debbie? Saying you can't win, you should be able to win every single race. That would have been fascinating to be in those conversations. Just a fly on the wall. Your dad must have. I mean, I would love to have interviewed him. Obviously, I haven't got that opportunity, but he just seemed like he would have been fantastic.
Yeah, look. I can remember one particular time. He had Phil would give him the stopwatch. So quite often when I do repetitions, Dad would be the timer or the starter or whatever, standing at the end finishing line. And I remember one time of him starting the race and missing the time, right? So he didn't get the time. And it was a race that I ran, and I ran really well. And I walk over to him and go, what time did you do? And before that, Phil had said, oh, Les, I think you either got to lie or you got to move away and not let her ask you, because she's going to go nuts when she finds out you didn't do the timing properly. And I walk over to him and I said, oh, what was the time, Dad? And he said, oh, I'm really sorry, darling, I missed it. And I said, take a deep breath. I said, that's okay, doesn't matter, we'll get the next one. And Phil looks at me and goes, what? That's not what you do for me if I muck it up. And it was just, Dad was just always there, always supportive. And yes, he wouldn't believe it when Phil would say, you're not going to win today, because Dad was a very positive person. But at the same time, you've got to have truthfulness.
You do.
And your achievements that are achievable. So, you can't just say, oh, we're going to win today, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and they're not ready. I mean, it boils down to even someone at school sport. If they're not quite ready, you tell them a positive, but you also tell them, what they can or can't do, so that they believe in you, rather than saying, oh, you're going to win this, and you're a second and a half off the pace. So I think truthfulness is very, very important, and understanding that everyone's there working for you and they're not working against you.
Reading that article that Rhett Bartlett wrote, the historian at Richmond, when Les and Graham Richmond got together to put together this team in the 60s, your dad was disappointed because you won 4 flags, not 5 in that time. And he said, we should have won 5, so we should have won 5. So he's obviously never happy, even though you were the most dominant team and the most hated team during that time as well. So they achieved a lot, but still didn't quite get there, Debbie, to what Graham and Les had aimed for. Incredible.
I grew up barracking for Richmond, and obviously because it was so big in the family. But when my husband, he was Carlton. And he took me to a function with Carlton, and Carlton gave me a jumper at the function after the Commonwealth Games. This is before the Olympics. And much to my dad's disgust, I ended up following Carlton.
he didn't burn the jumper because they hated each other.
Yeah, so he would always come with us when it was a Carlton-Richmond game, but the majority, I still barrack for Carlton now, so I still, my second team will always be Richmond, but if I go to a Carlton-Richmond game, it'll probably be Carlton that I'll barrack for. Sorry.
That's all right, fantastic. Just before I let you go, Debbie, and it's great to have Debbie Flintoff King here for Dashing Dan's Olympic Adventures for Aussie Home Loans. They can deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and capital. They do Zoom, etc., and they've got a number of different areas of expertise as well. I wanted to ask you, the Olympic Games a couple of months away. You're looking forward to it?
Look, this will be, we didn't go to Tokyo. We've been to every Olympic since 84 except for Tokyo. Wow. And we won't be going this one either. The presentation on the TV is so good in the front row seat. I mean, yes, the atmosphere may not be there, but we've been to a lot. So I am looking forward to coming home, turning on the TV, seeing the results, watching the sport. So I'm very much looking forward to it.
Outside Seoul, was Sydney the best one you've been to?
Sydney and London.
Yeah, London was great. I went there.
London was amazing too. Yes, Sydney was amazing. London was amazing. So I would have to say yes, those two I'll always remember those 2 Olympics.
Something about the big cities. They do it well, don't they? And they've got the room to do it too, haven't they? Some of those smaller cities, which well before our time, Helsinki, etc., probably, well, I won't get that chance again, I wouldn't have thought. But that's a little bit of an issue, Debbie, isn't it, in regard to whether cities are going to bid for it, because it's so expensive nowadays.
Yeah, I don't understand why it gets so expensive, but you're right. I'm looking forward to Brisbane, very much so, being in Australia. And I know Australia will do a good job because they always do of sporting events. Yep. But you're right, you've got to have the big enough city, you've got to have the funds. It's not easy, and it's a shame that the smaller cities can't do it, but they wouldn't cope. So unfortunately, it is left to the bigger cities, and with the amount of people that come in, you've got to have the accommodation, obviously, and it's got to run smoothly. You've got to have the transport. So it's a huge thing. But once it's done, it's like, wow, that was amazing. And it's pretty hard to beat someone like Sydney and London, that's for sure.
Debbie, it's been a great pleasure catching up with you once again. Your story is one of the greats. It was one of the best performances that we've ever seen on the track, a magnificent win in Seoul in 1988. Thanks for reliving it for us, and enjoy the Olympic Games. Thanks for joining us on Dashing Dan's Olympic Adventures for Aussie Home Loans.
Thank you, Dan. Are you going over it all, or are you going to be at home?
I'll be at home watching. I'd love to be commentating. I still love it, but I'll be watching every single minute of it, and can't wait. I think we'll, as we always do, win quite a few gold medals, and particularly hoping that Jessica Fox can win both the C1 and K1 in the slalom canoeing to maybe put a full stop on a great career. So they're just some of the things I'm looking forward to. It's always a great time, isn't it?
Yeah, fantastic. Love it. Great time to be just sitting home doing nothing else.
Absolutely. Debbie, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dan.